Hello, good afternoon. My name is Susanne Oberhäuser, and I'm the head of the European Parliament office here in London. In the name of the Parliament, I welcome everybody here to this conversation that we will be having on the outcome and the impact of the US elections. Now, the American people have spoken, and whilst we're waiting for the result, which is important because voting is still ongoing, we have today two very distinguished guests with us who, from personal experience and professional expertise, are very well placed today to guide us through what is happening at this moment in time on the other side of the Atlantic, what has not happened, perhaps even more importantly, and what we might expect to see in the next days and who knows more. So I'm very, very happy to have with us today Mr. Radek Sikorski, who has been elected to the European Parliament last year, who is the chair of the delegation to the US, who has previously served as foreign minister, defense minister, and also marshal of the parliament, the same in his native Poland, and who has also a distinguished career in journalism and academia on both sides of the Atlantic and indeed the Channel. I'm also very, very happy to have our good friend and neighbor in Smith Square with us today, João Vale de Almeida, who is the first EU ambassador to the United Kingdom, and he has previously served as ambassador to Washington and to the United Nations after a long and distinguished career in the European Commission in Brussels. So we are very well placed today with our experts who we are interested to hear their take on the impact of what we are seeing currently unfolding, not only on the triangle of EU-US relations, but also UK-US relations and then EU-UK relations, but also on the wider geopolitical landscape, the multilateral order, security and defense, climate change, with today the formal withdrawal of the US of the Paris Agreement. So there are many subjects to explore and to discover, and we're very happy to have Dr. Hannah White with us today. She is the Deputy Director of the Institute for Government, and she will steer us through these discussions. And so a very, very warm welcome. Thank you very much to our speakers, to the moderator, and I wish us all an interesting discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Suzanne, and hello everyone. Very warm welcome to today's webinar titled The US Elections the Day After. It's a good thing we didn't title it something like a discussion of the results, because we don't have those yet. Americans have been to the polls, as Suzanne said, to elect their next president, but as we speak, it's unclear who they have chosen. And the outcome, whether it comes in hours, days or weeks, or perhaps only following adjudication by the Supreme Court, will have a bearing, as Suzanne said, not just on the US, but also on its relationships with countries around the world, including Europe and the UK. And so I'm delighted to be moderating this conversation today with Mr. Sikorski and with Ambassador Vale de Almeida to discuss the implications of, well, either a Biden victory or a Trump victory. Not quite the discussion we thought we were going to have, but nonetheless plenty to talk about. I'm going to begin by putting some questions, and we'll have a conversation between the three of us. But then we'd really like you who are watching to have the opportunity to put some questions. So as you know, this webinar is being live streamed on YouTube and on Facebook Live. So if you would like to ask a question, please do so using those platforms. Send those in to us and they will be put through to me so that I can put them to our guests today. We have about an hour. So we'll get the discussion straight underway. And as I say, do please keep your questions coming. So to kick off, it's kind of the obvious thing, but I'd like to ask you both for your initial reactions to where we are now. Mr. Sikorski, we've seen record turnout. We've seen both candidates trying to sound confident and optimistic, but the result is still too close to call. What's your reading of where we are now?
I think it's white smoke. I think Biden has won. If he gets Wisconsin and Michigan, which looks likely, it's over. Even if President Trump challenges Pennsylvania, he's lost. So it's all over bar the shouting.
And we've certainly seen some sort of statements from the president to try to sort of perhaps anticipating that outcome to cast doubt on it in advance.
Well, yes, and of course he's not a man to concede. He will do whatever it takes. He's already hinted that he will try to take it to the Supreme Court, which of course he has the sympathy of, but I don't think it will ultimately succeed because Biden also is very strong in the popular vote, so legitimacy will be on his side.
Joao, what's your reading of where we find ourselves?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for the invitation. This will be personal views because I'm not representing the opinion in as such here. And these are anyway preliminary observations for obvious reasons. I will make maybe 3 comments. The first one is to congratulate the American people, because I think the level of participation has been quite impressive. They're setting new records. And at the times where democracies are being challenged and attacked and criticized, the level of participation is a good indication that people want to have a say about the future of the country. We can comment on other aspects of the democratic system in America, but the participation is a good one, and the figures are record figures, and that's a good thing. The second comment I would say is that I see a certain degree of stability in the American political scene, even if at the end of the day there will be a change of president. The underlying currents, the underlying trend, are very much stable ones, and the fact that President Trump has got more votes than he had in the first show that there is the Trump phenomenon is there to stay, and what is behind that phenomenon is there to stay. So I think a degree of stability in the American situation is one that we need to take note of. There were no tectonic changes in the electorate. There were not blue waves or red drownings and nothing of that. What remains, and that's my third comment, is a profound division within America. I lived there more than 8 years. I visited all the 50 states, and this is not new for me, to be very frank. It was visible 10 years ago when I arrived, and it's only got worse. And this is a reality that is very important for us, external partners of the United States, to consider. My final introductory remark is about what is going to change in the American position in the world. Well, it depends largely whether Mr. Biden, Vice President Biden, wins the election or not. But even if he wins, if the Democrats don't have the Senate with them, and even if they apparently are losing positions in the House of Representatives, one needs to question about the governability of the American system in the coming years, and the capacity for Americans to sort of extract themselves from their introspection and being good partners and useful partners and active partners of the EU or the United Kingdom. So let's see what the results will bring. But I would leave this couple of remarks as the first observations.
Thank you very much. Mr. Just to pick up on something Joao was saying there, I mean, even if Biden does win, as you say you think is likely, this is going to be the sort of repudiation of Trumpism that the Democrats were looking for, is it? And so what does that mean for a Biden presidency in these circumstances?
Well, no, I think it is a repudiation because, of course, the popular vote will give an overwhelming victory to Joe Biden. Joe Biden is only This is close only in the very particular circumstances of the US Constitution, which arguably on this score is not very democratic, because the votes of Americans are not equal depending on where they live. My wife voted in Maryland. She could not have, I mean, she might not have bothered. So no, Biden, if he gets the electoral votes, will have scored an overwhelming victory by a few million votes. And that means that the wave of populism, which has been sweeping the entire Western world, including Britain, will perhaps start receding.
And just to sort of take it from the other possible outcome at this stage, if Trump does get back in these circumstances, what do you think that will mean for how he governs?
Oh, there is nothing more dangerous than a leader in at the beginning of their second term, because at that time they think they can do almost no wrong. And given the unpredictability of this particular leader, we don't want to go there. That's really scary.
Joao, there's lots of talk that both sides are sort of lawyering up, and that Trump has, as we've said, raised the possibility of involving the Supreme Court. A legal battle isn't really an auspicious start to any presidency, is it?
Well, you know, we've seen that in America. America is a litigation society, litigation culture society to a large extent. Lawyers have a very important role in America, as we all know. And I don't know how it will evolve in the coming hours and days. But I return to my point. What I would like to see as a European, I'm sure this would be valid for British people. What I would like to see is an American party that is confidently and with full assurance engaging in cooperation with people like us, country like ours, addressing a very difficult international situation. I would like to see an American president, but also an American Congress capable of focusing on what are the main challenges of today, from climate change to terrorism to addressing the multilateral order and the challenges that other countries are confronting us with. This is what I would like to see from America. Do these results provide the conditions for America to act in that way? I have some doubts, but I'm more than eager to be contradicted by reality and to see the next president, whoever he is, the next Congress, engaging forcefully and in an active way, in a proactive way, with their allies, with countries that share their values and their strategic interests, bilaterally and multilateral in addressing these issues. This is what I would like to see out of this election. In the very first day after, I'm not yet fully convinced that we'll have that, but you know, I would love to be contradicted.
And just in terms of sort of Europe's position in relation to the new or the continuing president, how well has the EU been able to prepare for this election, of the outcome of this election, or have there been too many other issues, including obviously coronavirus going on, for that to be much front and center of people's minds?
Well, yeah, please go ahead, Radek.
Joe Biden is an old school Atlanticist, and he will not call us a foe. He will, I know for a fact, want to work with Europe to persuade China to be less assertive. We need each other on this. We need to sort out our differences. There are some, but we'll do it as allies and not in this spirit of acrimony and calling names.
Ambassador, did you want to come in there?
No, I'm just saying that, we, and Radek knows the US very well, even better than me. I've been posted there many years as ambassador. There's no limits for the surprises we have from the US. We've seen it all. So I think Europe is ready to engage with whoever wins the presidency, whoever controls the Senate and the House. We've done that before with very different presidents. And so we are ready to do that. We are willing, we are even, I would say, eager to do that. Because, one must realize that in the last few years, we have been, there's been some deficit in terms of the quality of the transatlantic relationship. This is nothing politically incorrect that I'm saying, it's the reality. So whoever wins, whoever takes over the White House and whoever controls the Congress, what we'd like to see is this willingness to engage. Of course, we know Vice President Biden very well. We know the people that are likely to be working with him if he wins, and I agree with Radek. I mean, they gave us all the confidence that they will do that. My question is a little bit deeper. Will they have the conditions to implement that agenda in a way that is compatible with the challenges that we have today? If they don't control the Senate, if there is a governability issue, if the divisions in the American society sort of impact on the political level, making concerns on foreign policy, for instance, much more difficult in the past. These are the kind of issues that I'm worried about. Again, I'm not pronouncing myself. I cannot do that on the president I would like to see at the White House. I'm just looking at the sort of structural constraints that this election may create that will or not facilitate international cooperation.
Radek, did you have any thoughts about that point that Joao raises about the fact that it doesn't look as though control of the House and of the Senate is going to change, probably? What sort of constraints, what difference will that make to either president?
Well, that's right. If Democrats don't gain the Senate, then there'll be less room for reform of American politics and the economy, and that will have a detrimental impact on the US standing in the world. But what affects Europe is something else. I mean, President Trump has been the first US president in living memory who has brutally interfered in the internal affairs of the European Union. For example, hobnobbing with Nigel Farage and vocally supporting Brexit. I mean, we don't root for Texas to leave the US Union. He's done that. And President Biden will not do that. He does not have an animus against either the European Union or any of its member states. So there will be opportunities to mend fences and to do good things together.
Ambassador, where do you think, in terms of foreign policy, the US focus will be in the next 4 years under the two different presidents?
Well, I think if President Trump wins, we would expect some continuity on a number of issues. I hope sincerely that there will be some changes as far as Europe is concerned. I remain hopeful that we can improve our cooperation in a number of areas, from trade to foreign policy to global challenges with the possible second Trump administration. If Vice President Biden wins, we would like to see, as Radek was mentioning, a revamping of the quality of our dialogue. And I think we have a long list of issues that we would like to discuss with the US, from trade to security issues. We would hope to see the US coming back to the Paris Agreement and be partners in fighting against climate change. But also on foreign policy, we started a dialogue with the American administration about China, for instance, and which I think is particularly relevant. And certainly Europe would like to continue, if not even improve and enlarge and deepen that discussion. Likewise for Russia, and an area where maybe people don't talk enough about, the whole issue of Africa. I think US European cooperation, maybe in the future, including also the UK, about Africa is absolutely necessary and crucial for the future. And I think there's a lot we can do together there, because we'll be sort of competing with other countries that are extremely active in Africa. And we know, as far as we are concerned, how important that continent is for us. But I could go on multilateralism, for instance. I mean, I would love to see the new American administration engage with us in reforming WTO, for instance, which is paralyzed. And if we are going to, the first thing we could do, for instance, to be in supporting the same candidate to lead WTO, and from then on provide necessary support for reform of a crucial, critical piece of the puzzle of multilateral institutions. Likewise for the United Nations, there's a lot we need to do about the Security Council and its operationality, and the reform of the UN in support of the Secretary General. So, I mean, a long list of issues that certainly we Europeans would like to see us working with the US. But again, once, as I hope we will have a deal with the United Kingdom before the end of the year in the post-Brexit situation, I think there's also a call for triangular cooperation in many of these areas.
And Mr. Sikorski, you brought up the question of Brexit. We've got a question from one of our viewers, Ian Bryan, who's asking about what the implications would be of a Biden administration for a trade deal between the UK and the US.
I don't think much will change. You probably know better, but here the difficulties are structural. Namely, what are you going to grant the Americans access to your agricultural market and to your health services market? And are you willing to accept American rules in those two markets? And I don't think that depends on who is in the White House, because huge American interests are at stake. And it's really up to Britain by which rules do you want to play. From Europe's point of view, I hope we get a deal. We are in the first week of November. At the European Parliament, we need to ratify this thing, and we will not ratify it without reading it. And it's thousands upon thousands of pages. And time is really running out, which is the more immediate crisis, I think.
Yes. Well, I think the other sort of question from the audience, our audience today, which relates also to Brexit, is one relating to the Northern Ireland situation. Obviously, it's been there's been some discussion in the UK, certainly about Biden's comments about Northern Ireland and the implications of his views about that for the prospects of a trade deal. But we've got a question from Phil Jones, who asks, what's the outlook for the Good Friday Agreement regarding Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland? Because the US has played a big role in establishing the Good Friday Agreement in the first place. What are the prospects going forwards?
Is this for me or to João?
Who would like to take it?
I can take it. I can take it because it's part of our daily life here, right? Listen, maybe on the points made by Radek about the trade policy, I agree with him. Trade policy is the Congress has a major role to play there, and there's a certain degree of rigidity in terms of trade policy in the US. Things don't change dramatically with the change of president. Nuances and priorities, of course, but the heart of the matter of the interest represented in Congress is always there. And I remember from my time, beginning of TTIP, and I'm sure my British friends negotiating with the US are finding pretty much the same issues that we found when we were discussing TTIP. So the situation doesn't change dramatically there. Regarding the Northern Ireland and the Good Friday Agreement, the recent discussions were triggered by the position of the British government in basically challenging the credibility of the withdrawal agreement and putting provisions in an internal market bill that challenge it. We acted against it. We have a legal action ongoing. And there is a political discussion about that. And I think the reaction from the US was pretty much bipartisan. coming from Congress, but also from the administration. And I don't think that will change with the result of this election. And people are very attentive to preserving and protecting the Good Friday Agreement. They would not like to see decisions by the British government will question that. That will be very high in their priorities, whoever wins in terms of the final shape of the UK-US deal.
May I?
Of course.
I'm deputy chairman of the group of Friends of the UK in the European Parliament, the UK-EU Friendship Group. And therefore, out of friendship, I'll tell you like it is. The Irish that I speak to certainly look to Vice President Biden as one of them. And I cannot remember in my lifetime a situation in which Ireland would be more or were more influential in two global power centers, more influential than the UK. I mean, Brexit was supposed to be about sovereignty, but Ireland as a member state, of course, has our support. And as you've heard from Nancy Pelosi, and you will hear in future, the Americans will insist that nothing bad happens to the Good Friday Agreement. So under those kinds of pressures, I would advise you to stick to the withdrawal agreement, because not sticking to it will have even more diverse, terrible consequences.
Well, I won't take that too personally, but I will hope that there are people who are listening to whom that will be relevant advice. Can we move on to the area of defence cooperation? Mr. Sikorski, what do you think either presidency will mean for the prospects of NATO defence cooperation and so on?
Well, Trump was, of course, right in urging allies to spend more on their own defense. I have to say, I even liked his style on this, because when Bush or Obama said the same thing politely, it didn't work. And defense spending has been rising, but glacially. President Trump has been an unreliable ally. We had no idea what he would do, either to NATO or in any emergency. And in Central Europe, we were shocked by his press conference with Vladimir Putin in Helsinki, at which he said he trusted Putin more than he trusted the FBI. You know, can you trust your national defense, also in the nuclear field, to someone who says stuff like that? Presidents Putin and Trump have been powerful arguments for European strategic autonomy. But unfortunately, our European leaders talk the talk, but don't walk the walk. Defense is a very expensive business. The Commission proposed 13 billion in the new multi-annual budget. That was a good beginning, 2 billion euros per annum for a whole continent is not a lot of money. But now it's been cut by half. And half of that, remember, is for military mobility, which helps NATO as well. So my test of whether our leaders in Brussels and in the capitals are serious is A, will they start abiding by the Lisbon Treaty, which pledged that we would do foreign policy in common? And B, will they start spending serious money on defense?
And how do you think the relationship between the UK and the EU will play out in relation to defence specifically? What's the sort of triangulation there between the UK-EU relationship and the Europe-US relationship?
Well, it'll be easier if we have an orderly Brexit, because if we don't, it'll all get messy and there'll be a blame game and it'll be harder. But of course, in the security field, there is an overwhelming need to collaborate, both on internal security and on external security, where Britain remains a serious player. So I hope we'll find a formula in which Britain could participate in at least consulting on Europe's overall foreign and security policy.
Can I say a word on that, Hannah, if I may?
Yes, of course.
On these issues. If I look back at the last 3, 4, 5 years, let's say after 2016, after Brexit and after Trump, and if I look at Europe and what we did in this area, there has been an acceleration, a very clear acceleration of investment in terms of the European dimension of foreign policy and security and defense in particular. And these changes maybe would not have happened without Brexit, and maybe would not have happened without Trump. And also, would not have happened without the pressure we have on our Eastern Front and Southern Front as well, for that matter. So there were a number of factors that have triggered this new sort of frontier of European integration. And I hope personally that we can do more in the future. The question now is to see what will be the impact of the next president in this context. If it is President Trump, again, we assume a certain degree of continuity in terms of the impact in the European situation. If it is President Biden, I think we should also hope that the elan that we created in Europe will not be diminished by the election of a president which is perceived, and maybe rightly so, as closer to Europe than the present one. So, as a citizen, I would like to see these dynamics that we are creating, of course, not yet satisfying RADAC entirely, but still a new dynamics, that it will be kept even if Americans elect a president who is closer and friendlier to Europe.
And just broadening out into the sort of wider geopolitical context in terms of the sort of balance of power around the globe, do you think that the alternative presidents we still have in prospect, and I'm informed by text message that Biden is still in the lead in Wisconsin and Michigan, is that going to make a difference in terms of the sort of the geopolitical shifts we've been seeing in relation to the US, China, and Europe, and so on? Radek?
Well, President Trump tried to fight a two-front war against Europe and China at the same time. And as a former defense minister, let me tell you, that's not a good idea. And under President Biden, we can join forces. And I've been proposing here in the European Parliament that we recreate COCOM. That was an instrument during the Cold War, the Coordinating Committee for the Transfer of Technology. We need a cooperation of democracies in monitoring technology transfers, outgoing and incoming investments, and industrial and cyber and medical standards, so that non-democracies don't take advantage of us. And I think with the new US administration will be much more interested in these ideas.
Well, I cannot, of course, express my preference of a president in the US. I'm not capable of doing that in my position. What I can say is to follow up on what I said earlier. We would like to see, I think Europe would like to see a president, whoever he is, and the Congress, with whatever composition, eager and open to cooperate with us in addressing the geopolitical and geoeconomic and geostrategic issues that the West is confronted with these days, and that includes our relationship with our neighbors, Europe. That includes the relationship with China, obviously, and that includes the multilateral liberal order that requires urgent assistance. And if we can count on the US, again, whoever wins and whoever controls the Congress, I think this will be good for Europe. I think it will be good for the UK. I think it will be good for the US as well, and for the world balance as a whole.
Just a reminder to everyone watching that please do send in any questions you have that you would like to ask the two panelists. But to continue, we've touched a little bit on the relationship between the UK and Europe in the context of what's going on in America. Obviously, in the past, the UK has often seen itself as a bridge between the US and the EU. How do you think that's going to change now? And is that primarily a function of Brexit, or is it going to be also to do with who becomes president? I'll put that first to Mr. Sikorski.
Well, that was something of a British illusion, actually, because in the NATO context, Germany has for decades been a more important ally of the United States than Britain. Just look at where US infrastructure is. Where is the Africa Command? Where are the main Rammstein, the major forces that the US has been using in the Middle East? I mean, it's a British choice to be a subcontractor to the United States or a co-leader of a Europe that is hopefully becoming more relevant and more influential, at least in its own periphery. I'm afraid Brexit takes you to the outer edge of European decision-making. It's not going to enhance your influence. But that's the choice you've made.
João, what advice would you give to the UK in terms of influencing now, in terms of how this new sort of fabled term of global Britain can best be sort of established?
Well, you don't expect an ambassador here to advise the government, right? What I can say is that we made an offer to the United Kingdom in the context of the negotiations of the future relationship, and the offer was to include in our deal, which we are negotiating, an important chapter on foreign policy and security cooperation. Linking up the UK as a third country, but still linking it up with CFSP and all the other instruments that we have in this domain. This offer was rejected, and in fact, we are not negotiating that chapter. The table is empty. We are there, but the Brits are not. We regret that. I may understand why they're doing this, but I think this was the best evidence of our willingness to engage with the UK, regardless of Brexit or beyond Brexit. And I think we'll remain open to that, but we regret the fact that they didn't want to engage right now. I think there's enormous potential for that. There's an enormous need for that. It makes a lot of sense. A structured cooperation with the European Union does not exclude bilateral relationships with individual countries in the European Union. It's complement to it, and it's an added value on top of bilateral cooperation. And I think, and I hope that if we have a deal, if we create the right climate after the 1st of January, I'm sure we'll find ways to return to that kind of discussion. And if Washington is ready to engage as well, I think there are areas where we could imagine fruitful triangular cooperation in a number of these areas, if not all of them.
We've had another question come in from Phil Jones, who asks, and I think I'll put this one to you first, Mr. Sikorski. What are the prospects for the rule of law, democratic values and human rights in Europe, given who becomes the US president?
I think that's a good question, because President Trump was vociferous and clear in his preference for dictators. He had fun with Kim Jong-un and showed disdain to democratic allies. And so this will change if Joe Biden wins, because Joe Biden will go back to the sort of traditional American role of, at least by example, spreading democracy around the world. My own country, Poland, have benefited from that American attitude, and we tried to be America's partners in giving a good example of a successful transformation from dictatorship to democracy and from a command economy to a free economy. And I think this serves our Western interests. And I hope the US will return to that role, which enhances America's soft power as an example to follow around the world. An America that is nationalistic and selfish and says so is not a reliable ally, because that means that in any given situation they warn us that they will do whatever is in their own national interest rather than in the interest of the Western democratic community as a whole. And if you want to be a leader, you can't emanate selfishness like that, because leaders need followers, and followers follow if they think that the leaders will protect them and help them along. That's the role of the leader. And so, yes, America will need to retrench. America needs to sort out its infrastructure, its economy, its political system. But I believe that Joe Biden can do it.
I was going to just ask that very question. How, if Biden does win, how persistent do you think some of the sort of approach that Trump has taken will be within the American system in terms of the way he operated? Are there lasting impacts that even if the policies change, some of the ways that he went about doing politics will continue to shape America, do you think? Well,
like other populists, Trump often correctly identified the problem. I mean, the problem of China taking advantage of an open trading system is something that Democrats and Republicans agree on, and we in Europe also agree on. But, the first thing he did was to withdraw from the Trans-Pacific Free Trade Area. How did that serve the end which he desires? Or, he engaged in this ridiculous diplomacy with North Korea. I mean, show me one thing that he's gained, except legitimizing a nasty Stalinist genocidal dictatorship. Nothing else to show for it. So we need a safer pair of hands. Of course, Iran, North Korea, Russia, China, these are very difficult problems, but populists promise simple solutions to complex problems, and then they approach them incompetently, and do more harm than good. In politics, as in medicine, primum non nocere. First thing, don't do harm. And you mentioned there one of the things you think a Biden presidency would need to focus on is sorting out the political system in the US. What do you think are the real prospects of that happening after this election? Well, of course, it's very difficult to change the American Constitution, but some things could be done without that. I understand that the way that the Electoral College works, for example, is you could change that without changing the Constitution. For example, by abolishing this principle that winner takes all in states. That would democratize the system. You don't need to change the Constitution to change this racket of districts that are carved to serve the incumbents. You don't need to change the Constitution to abolish a system whereby you need $7 million every 2 years to be elected as a congressman, and above $20 million to become a senator. I mean, we don't need this kind of money in politics, and it's not really democratic. So there are many things you could do without changing the Constitution.
And can I come back with one point on can I say a word about climate? Absolutely. About climate change, because you or Suzanne, someone in the beginning introduced the point that exactly yesterday or today that the US actually left the Paris Agreement. Whoever is the next president, and again, I cannot pronounce myself as freely as Radek on this, but whoever the next president is, I think, he would have an invitation from Europe at least to rejoin the Paris Agreement. And as we are in Britain, and Britain is chairing with the help of Italy, the COP26, which will happen in a year's time, this is a very precise invitation to the new American administration to join efforts with us. As we know, we are not doing enough on climate change. COP26 will be a very important rendezvous. It fits well in the first year of the new American presidents to regain leadership on that, and I think we'll all be very eager to again work with the American administration on that. There's a good opportunity in 2021.
Just to build on that point, I was going to ask you to sort of cast your mind forward to over the next 4 years, the end of the next 4 years when we're approaching the next presidential election, and ask what you hope will be different about international relations or international institutions by that point. João, do you want to try that?
For me, I mentioned one, a Paris Agreement. We could think about Iran. What is the next steps? What are the next steps of a future American administration regarding the Iran deal and its implementation? Are they going to rejoin? Under what conditions? What is their Iran policy? I think this is a very critical element. I mentioned WTO and the multilateral system as such. We would like to see the US actively engaged in reforming, adapting, preserving, but adapting the multilateral system, helping the Secretary General, starting with WTO, with WHO, for instance, where things need to be done in the follow-up of this pandemic, and many other organizations where we need a strong coalition of democracies and countries sharing the same values. Otherwise, this liberal international order is under serious risk. But we would like to see certainly an administration more involved with our neighborhood, from the Balkans to Syria to beyond, and also, as I said earlier, with Africa. These are some areas where we would like to see a more engaged America. This being said, go back to my very early points about the internal domestic situation in America, which is very much one that is leading more to introspection than engagement in the world. And if we see the results of President Trump in this election, where he has more support than he had before, we have reasons to believe that the domestic debate in America will still mobilize quite a substantial energy from the new administration. And my point is, I hope that the new administration will have sufficient bandwidth to be able to engage internationally in the way that both Radek and myself are pleading.
Mr. Sikorski, do you have any aspirations for where you would like us to be in 4 years' time?
By some measures, China is already the largest economy on earth. In 4 years' time, it will clearly be. And what keeps me awake at night is the thought that the way China sees its traditional role, which is to be surrounded by states that defer to it culturally, economically, and politically, and that this is incompatible with the system of American alliances in the Far East, particularly as regards Taiwan, which President Xi has pledged to regain, whether peacefully or by force. And the challenge for us in Europe will be how to stay allies with the United States without being drawn into that conflict.
I just want to put a couple of more questions which have come through from our audience. So forgive me if they sort of don't seem entirely in sequence. I have one from Jerome Duch, who asks, do you fear that the radicalization of American politics and some very populistic attitudes there could have an effect on political internal battles in the European Union? I'll start to you, Mr. Sikorski.
Well, the radicalization might happen now if Trump calls on his supporters to challenge the result which I think is coming later in the day, then let's remember what the radicals have on the right-wing side, which radicals in Europe don't have, which is over 100 million items of firearms, including automatic weapons. And there are some, and let's remember that in the last decade or so, the great majority of terrorism in the United States has been from the far right. This is a great danger, and of course it would have some kind of impact on us, but I'm not sure which way it would go. I just hope that someone stops President Trump from escalating.
On this point,
Yes.
Hannah, as a European citizen, I would say that what worries me most is that the confirmation of the polarization of America these days after this election. I mean, some people were hoping, maybe naively, that a clear change in majority would put that to rest, and that Americans would start with new attitude of reconciliation, of consensus. I'm afraid we are not seeing that in these results. And that's what worries me the most. And I have no illusions that whatever happens in America, sooner or later, crosses the Atlantic. So I think we need to be very attentive ourselves on this side of the Atlantic to prevent that from happening, take preventive action in our own democracies to avoid that. Because from a citizen point of view, I think this is my main concern today.
If I may add, the polarization didn't just happen. It was encouraged by people who made money from it, not just the Murdoch press and Fox News. Also, let's remember, the algorithms of the major social media are structured in a way to encourage polarization, because that keeps people engaged and that makes more money for their owners. And the US Congress is already captured by that business, and they will not regulate it. China will not regulate it because it's the state's business. So the only major power center in the world that can regulate social media in a way that makes them into social services rather than factors for disintegration is the European Union, because as nation states, we're also too weak to regulate those giants.
So there's a very related question from David Harley, which has come through, and he asks, is there an opportunity here for the EU to take over from the USA as the beacon of liberal democracy and the defender of the rules-based international order?
I think we do that already, right?
Yes, but, I've reread Larry Siedentup's book called Democracy in Europe, and he made the argument ages ago that we need each other because only by anchoring ourselves, Europe in the American coastal culture and American pro-democracy elites in the European tradition, we make democracy safe in both places. And I think that was incredibly prescient to have written that 10 or 15 years ago.
So we only have a couple of minutes left now. Just to wind up, I wonder, as we wait to find out the outcome of the election, if you could just give us both some final thoughts on what you think the priorities ought to be now for Europe looking towards the US. Mr. Sikorski, do you want to begin?
Well, I think we should, with the new administration, we should sort out this business of Airbus and Boeing, and at a time when we are spending freely hundreds of billions of euros on helping our businesses survive, some issues over a couple of billion from 15 years ago should really be got rid of. And we should have a serious, mature conversation as allies and as friends as to what we can do together and not how we can take advantage of one another.
João?
I would say in a very pragmatic way, let's have a rendezvous at the end of January, beginning of February, after the inauguration, and let's draw a list of irritants that we should get rid of, and the list of things that we can do together, a negative and a positive one, and let's focus on that. Let's have an early harvest of the usefulness of the transatlantic cooperation, and let's build on that for the 3 years of the mandate of the next president. I will be extremely pragmatic. I think it's obvious that we need the US needs us, and the world needs the transatlantic relationship to work. Let's go down to business.
Well, let's just hope that the results of the election is clear by the end of January, so we can keep to your timetable. That's all we have time for today. Thank you very much indeed to my guests for joining us, and for you all for watching. And have a very good afternoon, everybody.
Thank you.
Be safe. Bye-bye.